In the vast wilderness of America's national forests, the line between adventure and danger can be frighteningly thin. These sprawling natural treasures offer breathtaking beauty and the promise of exploration, but they can also be unforgiving to those who underestimate their power. For one young man from Tennessee, what began as a simple afternoon run in the mountains of Colorado would become one of the most perplexing missing persons cases in recent memory. On July 23, 2015, 18-year-old Joe Keller and his childhood friend Colin Gwaltney decided to go for a run along a gravel road in the Rio Grande National Forest. The two friends, who had known each other since kindergarten, were on a summer road trip with another friend, enjoying their freedom before returning to college in the fall. They were staying at the Rainbow Trout Ranch in Conejos County, Colorado, a remote area of stunning natural beauty. As they jogged along Forest Road 250 that afternoon, the friends decided to split up, with Colin running ahead at a faster pace. They agreed to meet back at the ranch for dinner. It was the day before Joe's 19th birthday. He never returned. What followed was a desperate search that would span nearly a year, involve hundreds of volunteers, and ultimately end with a heartbreaking discovery. Join me as we explore the mysterious disappearance of Joe Keller, the runner who never returned. Joseph Lloyd Keller was born on July 24, 1996, in Cleveland, Tennessee, a small city of about 45,000 people located in the eastern part of the state. Growing up in this close-knit community, Joe developed into an athletic, outgoing young man with a passion for outdoor activities and sports. Standing 5 feet 7 inches and weighing 180 pounds, Joe was physically fit and strong. He had excelled at track and swimming at Bradley Central High School, where he had graduated before enrolling at Cleveland State Community College. Despite having suffered from asthma as a child, he had overcome this challenge and become an accomplished runner, open water swimmer, and obstacle course racer. Friends and family described Joe as kind-hearted and dependable. He volunteered most Saturdays at the Salvation Army and was already registered for his second year of college. According to his father, Neil, Joe was considering becoming a math teacher. He was the kind of young man who made plans for the future and followed through on his commitments. In the summer of 2015, Joe embarked on a western road trip with two of his closest childhood friends, Colin Gwaltney and Christian Fetzner. Colin was a member of the varsity cross-country team at Division I, Tennessee Tech, and the two often ran together. The three friends had been traveling for about 10 days in Gwaltney's old Subaru, visiting Las Vegas, San Francisco, and the Grand Canyon before heading to Joe's and an uncle's dude ranch, the Rainbow Trout Ranch in the San Juan Mountains in southwestern Colorado. The ranch is located in Conejos County, which, despite being larger than Rhode Island, has only about 8,000 residents and not a single stoplight. It's a rural agricultural area where sheep graze in mountain meadows and potatoes and barley are grown in the valleys. The eastern plains of the county stretch across the agricultural San Luis Valley, while its western third rises into the 1.8 million acre Rio Grande National Forest, which sprawls over parts of 9 counties. It was in this remote, beautiful, but challenging terrain that Joe would disappear without a trace. On the afternoon of July 23, 2015, Joe and Colin were feeling cramped after their long road trip and decided to go for a run to stretch their legs. The weather was pleasant, with summer sunshine warming the mountain air. The ranch sits at an elevation of nearly 9,000 feet, significantly higher than what the Tennessee natives were accustomed to, but both young men were in excellent physical condition. At approximately 4:30 p.m., Joe and Colin set out from the Rainbow Trout Ranch, heading west along Forest Road 250, which follows the Conejos River upstream into the National Forest. Joe was dressed lightly for the run, wearing only red running shorts, blue trail shoes, and an Ironman watch. He was shirtless, with his blonde hair and muscular build making him look more like a California lifeguard than a Tennessee farm kid, as one observer later noted. He left his phone and wallet at the ranch house, not expecting to be gone for more than an hour. As the two friends jogged past the corral, one of the female wranglers at the ranch called out, "Pick it up!" They smiled, and Joe sprinted ahead briefly before they settled into their respective paces. After about 10 minutes of running together approximately a quarter mile from the ranch, they decided to split up. Colin, the more experienced runner, wanted to maintain a faster pace than Joe, who was taking it a bit easier, perhaps feeling the effects of the high altitude. They agreed to meet back at the ranch in time for dinner. This decision, for the friends to separate on an unfamiliar trail in a vast wilderness area, would later be scrutinized endlessly by family members, investigators, and armchair detectives. The GPS track on Colin's watch shows that he turned right off Forest Road 250 onto the ranch drive and tried to check out 3 geologic outcroppings known as Faith, Hope, and Charity that loom over the ranch. When the run became more of a scramble, he cut back down toward the road and continued upriver. A fly fisherman reported seeing Colin about 2.5 miles up the road but did not see Joe. Colin never encountered his friend again during the run. After completing his workout at a pace that left him vomiting due to the altitude, Colin returned to the ranch house and waited for Joe. An hour passed with no sign of him. As dinner time approached and Joe still hadn't returned to get ready, concern began to grow. Around 7:30 p.m., Colin and Christian drove up the road in search of their friend, honking the horn and waiting for Joe to emerge from the trees. By 9:30 p.m., about 35 people, including ranch staff and guests, were out looking for the missing runner. They called his name and searched the immediate area, focusing particularly on the rock formations near the trail. "If he was hurt, he would have hurt us," recalled Joe's uncle, David Van Berkom. "He was either not conscious or not there." As darkness fell over the mountains, the search became more difficult and dangerous. Joe was out there somewhere, lightly dressed and without food, water, or shelter. Even in summer, nighttime temperatures in the Colorado mountains can drop dramatically. What had begun as a casual afternoon run was quickly becoming a life-threatening emergency. By 10 p.m. on July 23rd, the Van Berkoms called the Conejos County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Howard Galvez and 2 deputies arrived at the ranch around midnight. It was now technically Joe's 19th birthday, though there would be no celebration. The initial search was what professionals call a hasty search, quick and focused on the most logical areas where Joe might be found. Everyone still expected that he would find his way back by daybreak, perhaps with a wild story to tell about getting lost or injured. When morning came with no sign of Joe, the search intensified. Jane Van Berkom, Joe's aunt, contacted his parents, Zoe and Neil Keller, who immediately made arrangements to travel from Tennessee to Colorado. They arrived at the ranch at 2 a.m. on July 25th, along with their 17-year-old daughter, Hannah, having flown into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and driven 3.5 hours north. By 6 a.m. on July 25th, a professional search and rescue operation was underway. Starting at what searchers call the Point Last Seen, the ranch's big ponderosa pine gate, Roy Vreeland, a 64-year-old deputy fire chief from La Plata County, and his Belgian Malinois scent dog, Cayenne, picked up a direction of travel pointing up Forest Road 250.
The search for a missing Cleveland teenager in Colorado has been suspended. Sheriff Howard Galvez with Conejos County said in a news release they have found no new information or leads to where 19-year-old Joseph Keller may be. Galvez says the search will resume if new information is discovered. Keller went missing 2 weeks ago on July 23rd after he went running with friends in the mountains in Colorado. Deputies searched 30-mile radius of the area where he was last seen with the help of 200 people, 15 search dogs, and aircraft.
More search dogs arrived from Albuquerque, though they identified different directions of travel or none at all. Additional firefighters drove over from La Plata County to assist. It's worth noting that almost everyone involved in the ground search was a volunteer, as is largely the case with search and rescue operations across the country. Over the next week, the search for Joe Keller grew to involve approximately 15 dogs and 200 people on foot, horseback, and all-terrain vehicles. An infrared-equipped airplane from the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control flew over the area. Colin's brother Tanner set up a GoFundMe site that paid for a helicopter to search for 5 hours, and a volunteer flew his fixed-wing aircraft in the canyon multiple times. Someone even brought a drone to buzz the steep embankments along Highway 17 and the rock formation called Faith. A $10,000 reward was posted for information about Joe's whereabouts. The question on everyone's mind was, how far could a shirtless kid in running shoes get in this rugged terrain? Despite the extensive search efforts, no significant clues were found. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle or injury. Nothing to indicate what might have happened to Joe or which direction he might have gone after separating from Colin. After several days of intensive searching, volunteers began to drift away, pulled by other obligations. The few who remained conducted interviews, followed up on leads, and continued working with search teams and dogs, but the operation was clearly winding down. We had a very limited number of people, one volunteer later explained. That's fairly typical in Colorado. You put out calls and people say, well, if he hasn't been found in that time, I have to go to work. On August 4th, less than 2 weeks after Joe's disappearance, Sheriff Galvez officially called off the search. Without citing any evidence, he suggested to Joe's parents that they should consider the possibility that their son had simply run away from home, a theory that those who knew Joe found absurd given his close relationship with his family and his plans for the future. The absence of clues created a vacuum that quickly filled with anger, resentment, false hopes, and conspiracy theories. A tourist with a time-stamped receipt from a gift shop in nearby Horka initially claimed to have seen 2 men on the road, but later changed her story. A psychic reached out on Facebook to report a vision that Joe was west of Sedona, Arizona. There was even a far-fetched theory that he had been kidnapped to have his organs harvested and sold on the black market. We feel like he's not in that area. He's been taken from there, Neil Keller told a reporter months after his son's disappearance, reflecting the family's growing belief that something more than a simple accident had occurred. In August, a search team from Bradley County, Tennessee, traveled to Colorado to assist, but their efforts were also in vain. The FBI and other specialist organizations reportedly became involved later, but they too failed to find any trace of Joe. In October, Neil Keller again flew to Colorado, where he pleaded with Conejos County commissioners to persuade Sheriff Galvez to call in the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The family established a Facebook page and later a website seeking answers about Joe's disappearance. They increased the reward to $50,000 for information. Despite numerous fundraisers to finance more effective searches and prayer vigils organized by friends and family, the trail remained cold. Joe Keller had vanished as completely as if he had never existed, leaving his loved ones in an agonizing limbo of uncertainty and unanswered questions. Nearly a year passed with no significant developments in Joe Keller's case. Then, on July 6, 2016, a hiker crossing Conejos Canyon made a grim discovery: human remains in a remote, rugged area, approximately 4 miles west of Colorado Highway 17, near Forest Service Road 250. The location was within the search area that had been combed the previous summer, though the difficult terrain and dense vegetation could easily have concealed a body from searchers. Initial reports did not confirm the identity of the remains, but the Keller family received word that clothing and other items found with the body were consistent with what Joe had been wearing when he disappeared.
Kindergarten, Colin Gwaltney.
Try to do a trip every summer. That's our plan. And last summer we went on the Appalachian Trail and we hiked 84 miles, I think.
On August 8, 2016, Richard Martin, the Conejos County coroner, confirmed that DNA tests had positively identified the remains as those of Joe Keller. Martin told the Denver Post that Keller had died of a skull fracture after falling from a cliff, and that his death had been ruled an accident. "It is an accident, I'm sure of it," Martin stated. There was nobody else with him. A Facebook page dedicated to finding Joe was taken down, but a cached post acknowledged the DNA confirmation. Neil Keller, when reached by telephone, simply said, "Now he's found," adding that he believed there should be conversations about improving search and rescue operations in Colorado and throughout the nation. The discovery brought a measure of closure to Joe's family, though it also raised questions about how his body could have remained undiscovered for so long in an area that had been searched extensively. The rugged, complex terrain of the Rio Grande National Forest, with its countless ravines, cliffs, and dense vegetation, provided a partial explanation. Bodies can be incredibly difficult to locate in wilderness areas, even with trained searchers and dogs. The determination that Joe had died from a skull fracture after falling from a cliff aligned with one of the most straightforward theories about his disappearance: that he had left the trail, perhaps to get a better view or to explore, and had suffered a fatal accident in the unfamiliar and dangerous terrain. To understand how Joe Keller could have disappeared so completely and remained undiscovered for nearly a year, it's important to appreciate the nature of the terrain where he vanished. The Rio Grande National Forest is an enormous wilderness area covering 1.8 million acres, spread across several counties in southwestern Colorado. The landscape is characterized by steep mountain slopes, deep canyons, dense forests, and rocky outcroppings. Elevations range from about 7,000 feet to over 14,000 feet at the highest peaks. Forest Road 250, where Joe and Colin began their run, follows the Conejos River as it winds through a canyon. On the south side of the road, runners left as Joe and Colin jogged west. Cattle graze in open meadows along the river. On the north side, ponderosa pines, birthday candle the steep tuff until they hit sheer basalt cliffs, a massive canyon wall rising 2,000 feet above the gravel road toward 11,210-foot Black Mountain, as one writer vividly described it. This is not gentle, rolling terrain. It is a landscape of dramatic contrasts and sudden transitions. From relatively flat meadows to near vertical cliffs, from open spaces to dense forests where visibility can be limited to just a few yards. For someone unfamiliar with the area, especially a runner from the much gentler topography of eastern Tennessee, these conditions could be disorienting and dangerous. The area around the Rainbow Trout Ranch sits at approximately 9,000 feet above sea level, more than a mile higher than Cleveland, Tennessee. At this elevation, the air contains significantly less oxygen than at sea level, which can affect physical performance and decision-making, especially for those not acclimatized to high altitudes. Weather conditions in the mountains can change rapidly, with afternoon thunderstorms common in the summer months. While the day of Joe's disappearance was clear and pleasant, the nights in this region can be cold even in July, with temperatures potentially dropping into the 40s or lower. Wildlife in the area includes black bears, mountain lions, coyotes, and numerous smaller mammals. While attacks on humans are rare, encounters with large predators are possible and could be dangerous, especially for someone alone and without protection. Perhaps most significantly, the complex topography creates countless places where a person could become injured and hidden from view. A runner who stepped off the trail and fell even a short distance could end up in a location not visible from the road or main paths. The dense vegetation and rocky terrain could conceal a body from searchers passing just yards away. This combination of high elevation, extreme topography, rapidly changing weather, potential wildlife encounters, and limited visibility makes the Rio Grande National Forest a place where even experienced outdoors people must exercise caution. For someone like Joe Keller, athletic but unfamiliar with the specific challenges of this environment, a momentary lapse in judgment or a simple misstep could have fatal consequences. In the months between Joe Keller's disappearance and the discovery of his remains, numerous theories emerged about what might have happened to him. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and the coroner's determination that Joe died from a skull fracture after falling from a cliff, we can evaluate these theories more objectively.
Human remains have been found in the Rio Grande National Forest in Colorado. Now several locals believe the bones could belong to Joe Keller. The 18-year-old Cleveland resident vanished in the state last summer. The remains have been sent to a lab. Identification should be made in the next 3 months.
The most straightforward explanation, and the one ultimately supported by the evidence, is that Joe suffered an accidental fall. The terrain along Forest Road 250 includes steep slopes and cliff faces that could be deadly if a person lost their footing. Joe, being an athletic young man and an experienced runner, might have decided to leave the road to explore, get a better view, or simply challenge himself with a more difficult route. This theory is consistent with the behavior of many young, fit individuals in wilderness settings. The desire to push boundaries and explore beyond established paths is common, especially among those who may not fully appreciate the dangers of unfamiliar terrain. Joe might have seen an interesting feature, perhaps one of the rock formations visible from the road, and decided to investigate, not realizing how treacherous the approach might be. A related possibility is that Joe became disoriented due to the effects of high altitude. At nearly 9,000 feet, the Rainbow Trout Ranch is significantly higher than any location in Tennessee. Altitude sickness typically doesn't become severe below 8,000 feet. But even at this elevation, someone unacclimatized might experience shortness of breath, fatigue, headache, or mild confusion. These symptoms could have affected Joe's judgment or physical coordination, contributing to an accident. Some have suggested that wildlife might have played a role in Joe's disappearance. Perhaps he encountered a bear or mountain lion and, in trying to escape, ran off the trail and fell. While possible, this scenario seems less likely given the lack of evidence of an animal attack found with his remains. Additionally, predator encounters in this region, while not unheard of, are relatively rare. More controversial theories included the possibility of foul play. Some speculated that Joe might have been abducted or harmed by someone he encountered on the trail. Colin Gwaltney, Joe's best friend, initially believed that foul play was involved and suggested that someone in a truck might have picked Joe up. However, this theory became less credible as time passed without any evidence supporting it. The remote location, the timing of Joe's run during daylight hours, and the presence of other hikers and fishermen in the area made a random act of violence seem improbable. The theory proposed by Sheriff Galvez, that Joe had deliberately run away, was perhaps the least plausible of all. Those who knew Joe described him as happy, well-adjusted, and looking forward to his future. He had left all his belongings, including his phone and wallet, at the ranch. He had plans to return to college in the fall and had given no indication of dissatisfaction with his life. The suggestion that he would choose his birthday to abandon everything and everyone he knew struck his family and friends as absurd. In the end, the physical evidence and the coroner's determination point to a tragic accident as the most likely explanation for Joe Keller's disappearance and death. He probably left the road, either to explore or possibly because he became confused or disoriented, and fell from one of the many cliff faces in the area, suffering a fatal head injury. The fact that his body remained undiscovered for nearly a year, despite an extensive search, speaks to the challenging nature of the terrain and the limitations of search and rescue operations in vast wilderness areas. It's a sobering reminder of how easily a person can vanish in these environments, even when people know approximately where to look. Joe Keller's disappearance, while unique in its specific circumstances, shares similarities with other cases of people who have vanished in America's wilderness areas. These parallels can help us understand the broader context of such tragedies and the challenges they present to search and rescue operations. One comparable case is that of Randy Morganson, an experienced backcountry ranger who disappeared in California's Sierra Nevada mountains in 1996. Like Joe, Morganson vanished while traveling alone in rugged terrain. Despite his intimate knowledge of the area, he had worked as a ranger there for 28 years. His body wasn't found until 5 years later, when hikers discovered his remains in a remote drainage area. He had apparently fallen from a cliff while crossing a stream, breaking his leg and likely dying from exposure or drowning. Another case with similarities is that of Jacob Gray, a 22-year-old who disappeared in Olympic National Park in Washington in 2017. Gray was last seen riding his bicycle on a forest road. The bike and some of his camping gear were found the next day, but Gray himself seemed to have vanished without a trace. After an extensive search, his remains were discovered 18 months later in a ravine near a creek, about 5,000 feet in elevation and 10 miles from where his bike had been found. More recently, the 2018 disappearance of Cheryl Powell, a 60-year-old woman who vanished while her husband was parking their car at a campsite in the White Mountains of California, highlights how quickly someone can disappear in the wilderness. Powell, who was eventually found alive after 4 days, had fled from a man who threatened her and became lost trying to find her way back to the campsite. Her case demonstrates how even a brief separation from companions in an unfamiliar environment can lead to a dangerous situation. These cases and others like Joe Keller's share several common elements. They often involve individuals who become separated from their companions. They frequently occur in areas with challenging terrain where visibility is limited, and they highlight the difficulty of finding someone who has left established trails, even when searchers have a good idea of where to look. They also underscore a troubling reality about America's vast public lands. They are places where people can and do disappear, sometimes without leaving any trace for months or years. The sheer size of these wilderness areas, combined with limited resources for search and rescue operations, creates conditions where finding a missing person can be like looking for a needle in a haystack. The disappearance and death of Joe Keller had a profound impact on his family, the search and rescue community, and the broader public's understanding of the dangers of wilderness areas. For Joe's parents, Neil and Zoe Keller, and his sister Hannah, the nearly year-long period between his disappearance and the discovery of his remains was an agonizing limbo of uncertainty and false hopes. Like many families of missing persons, they experience what psychologists call ambiguous loss, a particularly difficult form of grief where there's no closure or clear understanding of what happened to a loved one. The discovery of Joe's remains in July 2016 brought a measure of closure, confirming what many had feared, but allowing the family to finally begin the process of mourning properly. They could now hold a funeral and memorial service, honoring Joe's life and coming to terms with his death. For the search and rescue community, Joe's case highlighted both the dedication of volunteers who give their time and expertise to find missing persons, and the limitations of current search methods in vast, complex terrain. The fact that Joe's body remained undiscovered for nearly a year, despite being within the search area, prompted discussions about how to improve search techniques and resource allocation. Neil Keller's comment after the discovery of his son's remains, that there should be conversations about improving search and rescue in Colorado and throughout the nation, reflects a common sentiment among families who have experienced similar tragedies. Many advocate for increased funding for search and rescue operations, better coordination between different jurisdictions, and more consistent protocols for missing persons cases in wilderness areas. The case also raised questions about the responsibility of local law enforcement in remote areas with limited resources. Sheriff Howard Galvez faced criticism for his handling of the investigation, particularly his suggestion that Joe might have run away and his initial reluctance to accept assistance from out-of-state agencies. This aspect of the case highlights the challenges of conducting complex search operations in counties with small populations and limited budgets. For the broader public, Joe Keller's story serves as a sobering reminder of the potential dangers of wilderness areas, even for young, fit individuals. It underscores the importance of basic safety precautions. Never hiking or running alone, staying on established trails, carrying essential supplies even for short excursions, and ensuring that someone knows your planned route and expected return time. Joe's case has been featured in books, podcasts, and articles about missing persons in America's public lands, including John Billman's The Cold Vanish, and various media outlets covering mysterious disappearances. These accounts often emphasize how quickly and completely a person can vanish in wilderness settings, even in areas that seem relatively accessible and well-traveled. Perhaps the most important legacy of Joe Keller's case is the reminder it provides of the dual nature of America's wilderness areas. They are places of extraordinary beauty and opportunity for adventure, but they also demand respect and preparation. The line between an exhilarating outdoor experience and a life-threatening emergency can be crossed in a moment of inattention or poor judgment. From Joe Keller's tragic disappearance and similar cases, several important safety lessons emerge for those venturing into wilderness areas. First and foremost, never explore alone. Joe separated from his running partner, Colin, and this decision likely contributed to his fate. Had they stayed together, an accident might still have occurred, but the uninjured person could have sought help immediately, dramatically increasing the chances of a successful rescue. The buddy system isn't just for children, it's a fundamental safety practice for wilderness exploration at any age. Second, stay on established trails, especially in unfamiliar terrain. While it can be tempting to explore off-trail areas for better views or more challenging experiences, doing so significantly increases the risk of accidents, becoming lost, or encountering hazards that aren't visible from the main path. If Joe had remained on Forest Road 250, rather than venturing onto the steep slopes beside it, his accident might have been avoided. Third, always carry essential supplies, even for short excursions. Joe left for his run with nothing but the clothes he was wearing and his watch. A small pack with water, high-energy food, a basic first aid kit, a whistle, a light source, and a communication device could make the difference between a minor mishap and a fatal emergency. Modern running vests and belts make it possible to carry these essentials without significantly impacting performance. Fourth, be aware of the specific challenges of the environment you're entering. The high elevation, extreme topography, and rapidly changing weather of the Colorado mountains present very different hazards than the forests and hills of eastern Tennessee where Joe grew up. Research your destination before you go, and consider consulting with local experts about potential dangers and recommended precautions. Fifth, ensure that someone knows your plans and expected return time. While Joe's friends knew he was out for a run, a more specific plan with details about his intended route and expected duration might have helped focus the initial search more effectively. Some outdoor enthusiasts use GPS tracking devices or apps that allow friends or family to monitor their location in real time. Sixth, respect the power of nature and your own limitations. Even fit, experienced outdoors people can find themselves in trouble if they overestimate their abilities or underestimate the challenges of their environment. There's no shame in turning back or choosing an easier route if conditions seem more difficult than anticipated. Finally, consider basic training in wilderness navigation and survival. Knowledge of how to orient yourself using natural features, how to signal for help, and how to respond to common emergency situations can be invaluable if things go wrong. Many outdoor organizations and community colleges offer courses in these skills. These lessons aren't meant to discourage outdoor exploration. The physical and mental benefits of activities like hiking, running, and camping in natural settings are well documented. Rather, they're intended to help people enjoy these experiences safely, with an appropriate awareness of potential risks and how to mitigate them. The story of Joe Keller's disappearance and death in the Rio Grande National Forest is a poignant reminder of both the beauty and the danger of America's wilderness areas. A young athletic man with his whole life ahead of him went for what should have been a routine run and never returned, leaving his family and friends to endure nearly a year of agonizing uncertainty before his remains were finally discovered. The most likely explanation, that Joe left the trail perhaps to explore or get a better view, and suffered a fatal fall, is tragically commonplace in wilderness settings. Each year, dozens of hikers, runners, and other outdoor enthusiasts die in similar circumstances across the country's national parks, forests, and other public lands. What makes Joe's case particularly compelling is how it illustrates the challenges of finding someone who has vanished in these vast natural spaces, even when searchers have a good idea of where to look. Despite an extensive search operation involving hundreds of people, dogs, horses, ATVs, aircraft, and drones, Joe's body remained undiscovered for nearly a year in an area that had been searched multiple times. This reality, that a person can disappear so completely in a relatively defined search area, is a sobering thought for anyone who ventures into the wilderness. It underscores the importance of basic safety precautions, never exploring alone, staying on established trails, carrying essential supplies, and ensuring that someone knows your plans and expected return time. At the same time, Joe's story shouldn't discourage people from experiencing the wonder and rejuvenation that wilderness areas can provide. Rather, it should inspire a healthy respect for these environments and a commitment to exploring them responsibly and safely. As we conclude our exploration of Joe Keller's disappearance, we're left with a mixture of sadness for a promising young life cut short and appreciation for the dedicated volunteers and professionals who work tirelessly to find those who go missing in America's wild places. We also carry forward the lessons that Joe's case teaches us about wilderness safety, lessons that might help prevent similar tragedies in the future. Joe Keller's remains were discovered on July 6, 2016, and positively identified through DNA testing on August 8, 2016. His death was ruled an accident, resulting from a skull fracture after falling from a cliff in the rugged terrain of the Rio Grande National Forest. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Remember that behind every missing person case is a human being with a story, a family, and people who care. Joe was not just a statistic or a cautionary tale. He was a young man with dreams, talents, and a bright future that was tragically cut short. Until next time, stay safe on your adventures. And remember that sometimes the most important part of any journey is returning home to tell the tale.